So, by way of opening comments here, this chapter is the end of the Book of the Covenant, and definitely could be a fairly lengthy address given on it. So we'll just touch on a few points, and we'll leave some time for comments by the brethren afterwards. So the chapter concludes the section of Exodus called the Book of the Covenant, which is the oldest piece of Hebrew legislation. The term Book of the Covenant comes from Exodus 24, verse 7, which says, "And he," that is Moses, "took the Book of the Covenant and read it in the audience of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient." The Book of the Covenant was recorded from Exodus 20, verse 22, through to the end of this chapter, chapter 23. The next chapter, Exodus 24, verse 3, tells us that this Book of the Covenant consists of two elements: the words, or commands, and the judgments. And that says, "And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice, and said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do." The words or commands include the "thou shalt nots," and as noted in Exodus 20, verse 18, and are noted in Exodus 20, verse 18 through to Exodus 23, verse 19. The judgments instruct us what is to be done when certain circumstances arise, and these are recorded in Exodus 21, verse 2 through Exodus 22, verse 17. So the start of this chapter is ending a section that is entitled, can be entitled, "The Laws Concerning Evil Practices," and that section commences in Exodus 22, verse 16. And ends in Exodus 23, verse 9. So these first 9 verses of the chapter are particularly talking about kind of laws of social ethic. So verse 1 is an expansion upon the 9th commandment, "Thou shalt not bear false witness," and expands upon it. The verse instructs against the raising of a false report. This original word implies not only to originate a story against someone, but also to repeat it, and in the process defame a person's reputation. It reminds us of James 4 and 11, which says, "Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother, and judgeth the brother, speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge." The instruction of verse 2 should be the theme of our lives by not following a multitude to do evil. Human nature is evil, and we see the continuous results of this nature manifesting itself all around us in the world that we live. Do not join to the world in their opinion, which can be the popular opinion, and it is an uphill battle. Being named as sons and daughters of God is in direct contrast to the ways of the world. The ways of the world tend to be easy to adjust to, whereas following divine instruction of Yahweh is often contrary to popular opinion. We are to be a holy people, which means to be a separate people. The ways of the world are these catchphrases such as commonality, acceptance, do not judge, need to accept people for how they naturally are, and free expression, and the like. Being sons and daughters of God is a lifelong effort of conversion, whereby we strive to daily convert our minds and our hearts from the ways of the flesh to the ways of the Spirit. It reminds us of Romans 12 and 2, which says, "Be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove that which is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Verse 3 warns against partiality, and in this case even against partiality of a poor man. God is not a respecter of persons, as we know in Acts 10, verse 34, and it is even wrong to be improperly partial towards the poor. Righteous judgment is the way of Yahweh. This principle is reiterated in verses 4 and 5, whereby we are instructed to assist even our enemy if we find his ox going astray and returning the ox to him, or to assist your enemy's ass that has fallen. No doubt we would do these tasks for our friend. This instruction is to treat our enemies in like manner. This echoes the teachings of Christ, which says, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." We have benefited from this divine principle, as noted in Romans 5, verse 8, which says, But God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. The wisdom of verse 8 would do many people well to practice. The taking of bribes and even gifts which have the intent to draw favoritism is the cause of many unjust practices in the world. The political donations by corporations and industry sway the establishment of national policy that is favorable to them. It is a rare case in this world where you can find power which doesn't come attached with some form of corruption. This verse explains that bribes and gifts produce blinding the wise and perverting righteousness. Righteous judgment does not work off of the principle, you scratch my back and I will scratch yours. This principle of not taking bribes even applies on a smaller scale, and we are wise to be on guard when there is a gift with the potential of an underlying motive. Verse 9 also puts things in perspective for Israel, in that they were to not oppress the stranger. God reminds Israel that they were strangers themselves in the land of Egypt. You don't have to go far to hear a Canadian citizen speaking ill about new immigrants or foreigners seeking refuge in Canada. One needs to be remembered that most of us need not go back any further than 4 or 5 generations at most to find when our lineage had immigrated to Canada. It is natural to feel it is just to treat an outsider with a lower level of care than someone who isn't. The divine instruction teaches us the righteous approach, which is contrary to the thoughts of the natural mind. So the next section we can entitle Laws Concerning Sabbaths and Annual Feasts, which is included from verses 10 to 19. Verses 10 to 13 are expansion on the fourth commandment, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord had blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Here the principle of the Sabbath is deployed upon the agricultural cycle of years in this chapter. The land gains a Sabbath year of rest, which the voluntary crop benefits both the poor and then the beasts. The same practice was also deployed on the vineyard and olive yard, which would produce a naturally full crop every year, being trees or vines. The Sabbath taught dependence upon Yahweh. This dependence requires faith. The same principle on the collection of only enough manna for the day and having faith that more manna would appear on the morrow is the same principle. The same principle of dependence on God is taught by Jesus so to the disciples as he instructed them in Mark 6 verses 7 to 9, which says, And he called unto him the 12, and began to send them forth by 2 and 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits, and commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey, save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in the purse, but be shod with sandals, and not put on 2 coats. So verses 14 to 16 continue on talking about the feasts. These verses instruct Israel, the children of Israel, regarding the 3 annual feasts to be kept. 1, the feast of the Passover. 2, the feast of harvest, also known as Pentecost or first fruits, or the Feast of Weeks. And lastly, the feast of ingathering, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles. Verses 17 to 19 almost seem to go to a different topic, but in reality they relate to the feast. Verse 17 tells us that the males were to appear before Yahweh 3 times a year. From Deuteronomy 16 and 16, we see that the males were to appear before Yahweh in conjunction with these feasts. And that verse says, 3 times in a year shall the males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose. In the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty. And verse 19 tells us that that which gives life, or in other words, mother's milk, is not to be the means to deliver death or deceive. This is a philosophical principle and is a divine teaching. And as one is reminded that Israel was not to eat the blood, that is, as the blood is the life. Moving on to the next section, which includes verses 20 to 33, it talks about the laws concerning angelic supervision. This section of the chapter tells the children of Israel that the angel of Yahweh will be in their presence. The fact of having this angel in their presence, if coupled with their obedience of Yahweh's commands, would result in great blessings, as we see in the chapter. This angel was labeled with the name of Yahweh, as stated in verse 21, and as such was acting in full authority of Yahweh. Verse 22 echoes the promise made to Abraham. I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Verse 24 echoes the first commandment. And verse 27 tells us that the fear of the God of Israel will be on the people that the children of Israel will approach in their journeys and in their establishment in the land, in the promised land. We can recall the Gibeonites who feared Joshua and the host of Israel, which led them to disguise themselves in order to establish a league with Joshua because they feared Israel and the God of Israel. Joshua 9:9 says, And they said unto him, that is to Joshua, From a very far country thy servants are come, because of the name of the Lord thy God, for we have heard of the fame of him and all that he did in Egypt. Obviously they were fearful of him. Verse 29 and 30 tells Israel the practicality that God has in the process of purging the land, in that it's not practical to empty the land of its inhabitants without being able to adequately populate the land with the Israelites. As such, the land was to be purged little by little, so that the land does not become desolate or overrun with wild beasts. Verses 32 and 33 is a final instruction that Israel were to not make any covenant with the people of the land of Canaan, nor with their gods, nor are the Canaanites to dwell in the land, because of the proximity with them would be a temptation and a snare to Israel. We know that this instruction was not followed, and Israel paid the consequences, which ultimately resulted in their demise and the judgment of being taken into captivity. This command is repeated in a number of places in Exodus 34, verses 12 to 16, Deuteronomy 7, verses 2 to 5, Joshua 23, 12 to 13, and also in Judges 2, verses 2 to 3, so lots of places. We are reminded of the league that Joshua made with the Gibeonites through their trickery. And Joshua 9, verse 14 and 15 says, And the men took of their victuals and asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. And Joshua made peace with them and made a league with them to let them live. And the princes of the congregation sware unto them. It came to pass at the end of 3 days that they had made a league with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors and that they dwelt among them. The result of this oath is evidenced in 2 Samuel 21, verses 1 to 9, and we'll just read the first 3 verses. It says, And there was a famine in the land of the days of David 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered, It is for Saul and for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites. And the king called the Gibeonites and said unto them, Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. And the children of Israel had sworn unto them, and Saul sought to slay them in his zeal to the children of Israel and Judah. Wherefore David said to the Gibeonites, What shall we do for you? And wherewith shall I make the atonement, that ye may bless the inheritance of the Lord? And we know the result was the death of Saul's sons. This action of the Gibeonites reminds us of the trickery that the world can have on us to break the commands of God. The ways of the flesh can be sneaky and approach us in ways that we are not aware of. We must always be on guard, praying for guidance and direction to keep away from worldliness and fleshly thoughts, even if covered or in a sneaky fashion. Joshua and the leaders of the people had a moment of weakness, as it states that they did not ask the counsel at the mouth of the Lord, which seems to imply that if they did ask counsel, that instruction would have been provided to make to avoid making the league. The children of Israel agreed to the Book of the Covenant as recorded in two places in Exodus 19 verses 7 to 8, which says, "And Moses came and called all the elders of the people and laid before their face all these words which the Lord commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord." And as we read also in Exodus 24 and verse 7, and he took the Book of the Covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, "All that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient." The law provides us with great insight to the mind of Yahweh as to his righteous judgments. We can see that these judgments and instructions are divine, as they are often contrary to the human mind. What a blessing it would be to have a civil law that was produced from the mouth of Yahweh. Israel had this blessing in that day, Israel had this blessing in that they had an administration which was divine. We can look forward to a time when the entire earth will be ruled with a divine administration as deployed by Christ and the saints.